So yesterday we talked about the housing crisis. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. Also, we talked about the drought and the problems that it was causing. I mean, we talked about biblical perspective here. Think about this. There's a new invasive species that is now causing major problems for farms all over the South. Actually, we saw one of these in Tennessee, didn't know what it was, and all of a sudden they came back and said, this is an invasive species and it will take over our crops. How does this invasive species get here? Have you ever wondered that? How did these things just quote unquote pop up? It's amazing, isn't it? Also, we're going to talk about how Washington, D.C. goes on lockdown. The numbers of per deaths per capita compared to most major third world country cities, Washington, D.C. is actually one of the highest. It goes on lockdown and Trump is pulling all moves to federalize this place. We're going to talk about what he just did and when it comes to Washington, D.C. Locking it down for safety. What does this mean? And then we're going to talk about two more innovations. These innovations are not as good as you would think, though. Babies being made in pods because we don't need mothers and fathers anymore. And then again, how much would a robot save you if you decided to take away the job of the factory worker? How much would it save you to bring in these robots? Now remember, they said within 5 years, we would see millions upon millions upon millions of robots doing the jobs of humans. Today we're going to talk about exactly the cost and how this is actually going to be detrimental. Let's dive into these stories. Hey guys, welcome to our channel. Thank you so very much for being here today. We are humbled again by your support, and we pray that you will have a wonderful day, but ultimately you get something out of this and that you can find peace and wisdom through it, and hopefully common sense approaches to just everyday living to make your family more sustainable and independent. First, let's talk about innovations. Let's talk about the dangers of these innovations. First, Jeff Bezos, new investment. Guess what he invested in? Jeff Bezos-backed startup Wild Type recently received an FDA clearance to sell its lab-grown salmon after the FDA, which did not require independent third-party studies. Listen to what I just said. The Food and Drug Administration just allowed Jeff Bezos to have this permit to sell his food, which is lab-grown salmon, meaning you're taking the natural reoccurrence of salmon out of the world and you're producing it in a factory now. The FDA, which did not require independent third parties testing, meaning the people that said that it's safe, there's no other third party testing to say, is it bought off safe or is it actually safe? Because this did not have third party testing, it's considered quote unquote safe, but it never had its testing like most other things do. Now it's safe for human consumption and it will be on the stores in America. You're taking that natural element out. The reason I say this is a big deal, did you see where RFK just came out and stated that the amount of toxins in the flu shot is actually, it's a neurotoxin, it's actually dangerous to humans. So this is the same FDA that allowed for this salmon to get passed and said it's safe and effective. This is the same FDA that says, well, the mercury in the flu shot is not bad for you. However, now when the studies come out, RFK says, look, it's actually a neurotoxin. It's actually very harmful for your body. And we've been getting these things year over year over year. Not me, but most people, majority of individuals. So you see what happens when we take Food Administration and Drug Administration. How much have they been bought out to say we're allowing these things to take place? And actually what we're doing is destroying our own food system. We're taking the natural form of food away from the choice of Americans. And we talked about the independence yesterday. We talked about the drought. We talked about now this lab-grown meat. We talked about how they're the ones getting the passes. It's amazing that Jeff Bezos can get a pass on his salmon and lab-grown meat, and also like Bill Gates' lab-grown beef, but I can't sell my raw milk off farm from the natural source of the cow, cleaned and put into a fridge, ready for consumption. I can't do that, but they can. Does that mean that mine's less safe and effective and there's more? No, it may mean that there's bigger players behind it. Do you ever think that, they're having this big outbreak in China with these mosquitoes? Wasn't there a certain billionaire that invested in putting GMO modified mosquitoes into the atmosphere? I don't know. I guess Bill Gates' mosquitoes has nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with this weird invasive mosquito disease that's happening that could be the next pandemic. No, it has nothing in common. So what actually happens is our government is kowtowing to allowing certain things to happen, certain provisions to happen. All the while, the actual safe and sufficient and the independence part and the sustainable part of food is saying, oh, it's bad. It's not good for you. Wild-caught salmon, bad for you. Beef, that is dirty. We need to grow it in a lab. What that does is that is power and control. And guess what? You'll be subservient to it, especially if you're not growing your own food. Now, this brings up the next point. There's an invasive species, and this is something that I actually witnessed in Tennessee. Misty actually saw it, and she was like, I've never seen a butterfly that looked like that. There's an invasive species that is starting to show itself in Georgia and Tennessee. We saw it in Mississippi. They actually put out warnings across all the big extensions and ag services about this insect. The spotted lanternfly. They are not just a lookalike, but they are an invasive pest that is going to cause a major threat, serious threat for all of agriculture. This was a Georgia agriculture release. Mississippi did the same thing. It said, if you see this spotted lanternfly, please squash it. Every kill helps protect our #1 industry, which is food. They've only been found in a few counties, but they're starting to spread like wildfire. Now, we actually saw one of these in the amusement park that we went to in Tennessee. Misty didn't know what it was, and then we identified it. And it says this lanternfly, and a lot of these things, again, how did these just, it's almost like biblical things like we were talking about yesterday. How does this all of a sudden, this big form of insect infestations happen? And we're like, oh, that's no big deal. It's just a cute little fly. Well, that one little fly could destroy all the crops to feed America. Well, isn't it weird that all of a sudden, as we're seeing all these insects cause damage to our crops, and it's at the same time that people like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates get these permits to sell meat with not proper testing from a factory that will be contained from not having the flies in the... Isn't it weird how all of a sudden that the crops that we need actually feed the animals actually feed us, but because we're hurting the crops, we're hurting the animals. The famine, like we talked about with the drought in the water and the water aquifers getting taken away from us because of government regulation, all that. And we still have billionaires that are not getting tested food correctly, but they're producing loads of your food in factories. It's weird how all that happens at the same time, isn't it? So now we see a mosquito situation happening in China that's causing for major lockdowns. Now we see a situation where this lanternfly is causing major problems for crops in America. If you remember, there's a flesh-eating disease that's literally causing problems for the cattle coming from the South American and Mesoamerican areas. In Mexico, they said we're not taking any more beef across to the U.S. from Mexico because of this new flesh-eating disease that they're having down there. Isn't it weird how it only affects the crops and the cattle? Isn't it weird how everything that comes along is a pestilence, but those pestilence are causing for deteriorations of our food system. Our food system then goes reliant on food that we can produce in warehouses, and man, now all of a sudden we see these rich billionaires get the passes from FDA to have and produce the food. Plain control. That's crazy, isn't it? All right, let's talk about the housing situation right quick. There's a story that just came out from Unusual Wells that says 1.53 million homes were listed for sale at the end of June. That is up nearly 16% from the year ago, the highest levels in several years. Now, at the same time, the highest level of buying from China and also big business is happening. So the local homeowner is not able to hold their home because of either not being able to afford it, or they bought too much home, or the cost of the carrying costs, such as the insurance, the taxes, and so forth. So there's more people selling than any time in history. There's less individuals buying than any time in history. However, there is more businesses like BlackRock and bigger like Blackstone and other players like even in China that are now buying our homes. And now we see that most states have at least 25 to 35% of home ownership actually corporate owned. It means we're losing home ownership in America. When we start seeing the deterioration of our food system and the deterioration of our freedom to own our own home and to grow our own food, we also see the deterioration of things that we're going to be talking about with the mother and father. What we're actually seeing is the danger of society to where we are literally not being able to be free anymore. I love what Ron DeSantis is pushing now about the end property tax. Like, for instance, just in our paper yesterday, I got a notice that our property tax is going up because the school systems need it. Now, the school systems are failing. They have about a grade C or D, not quite enough, so they're not quote-unquote failing, they're just not doing well. And these schools need more room and more stadiums and more baseball fields and more teachers, and to be honest with you, it's not helping the citizens of my town. It's not doing anything for us because we're not getting smarter, but now our government needs to get more property tax. Well, so this is what I love about Ron DeSantis is saying, look, in Florida, it's got one of the biggest property taxes ever because of the assessment of the values of the places because everybody's moving to Florida. But he says it's time to end the property tax. It's unfair for someone to have to keep paying for something after they've already paid it off to keep paying for it. Well, it kind of goes back to the same story that we just talked about. If people can't afford the property tax and the insurance to hold it, which insurance is at its very highest point because the values of houses have went up. You know how the values of houses went up? I'm going to blow your mind. Because we're not willing to pay well over what they're worth, but China and BlackRock are. It says that China and BlackRock are paying 3 to 4 times the value of a home. The places we were just at in the Smoky Mountains, I told you about my house that I used to have up there, went from 3 to 4 times worth its value now than when I actually owned it. Nothing's changed on it. Nothing has changed on it other than the speculation. And guess what? The biggest buyers right now in that area, corporate companies, not individuals. So we have a breakdown of our food system. We have the breakdown of home ownership. We have the breakdown of our crops and how the pestilence is almost like biblical. Back again. And now we're seeing no one can afford homes but the corporations. What does that mean? When corporations own something, you have to rent it from them. That means they set the rules and regulations, so you lose freedom. You can't grow the food there. That's not allowed. You can't have edible landscape. That's not allowed. You can't do this or that or this or that because it's not allowed. You don't own it. So what do we actually do? And we're actually becoming, like I always explain, as a farmer, what do I do when I want to catch animals up? I start getting them closer to the areas I want them to be. I start feeding them in a different area. I start tightening those fences around them. And before long, they don't realize it. I've caught them all up in one fence. They thought they had freedom because they're running around eating grass, but they're just where I want them. That's exactly what we see with the FDA allowing these permits to happen. They're telling me I can't sell my own pork or beef or milk, but he could sell that lab-grown salmon that's not been tested. And why did he get a pass and I didn't? Isn't it amazing? Shouldn't America be wanting people to grow their own food and be independent instead of depending on someone else? No. Plan control. Is having a mother and father important? Well, of course. And again, it's my mother's birthday, so happy birthday, Mom. And it's actually my son's birthday, so wish happy birthday to Jennings and my mom in the comments below. But I digress. Why is it important to have mom and dad? Because we believe the family unit is absolutely the most important thing that God has created. Other than his salvation through Christ, the family was the structure. Father, mother, and homes, raising children. Well, you know, they've slowly taken the father out of the home. It's not valuable anymore, so the government becomes that person. Now we're starting to see surrogacy, which has become crazy. That's in a whole other video. But now, we've lost the fact of the family. We've lost the fact of the father. Now we're seeing, do we actually need a mom? Do we need a mom to actually birth this baby anymore? Listen to this. This is from Mario Nafal. It says, growing babies in labs. It's coming soon. Is the scientists are working on baby growing machines that could make pregnancy totally optional. Yes, no more baby bumps, just high-tech wombs doing the work. This could break everything we think of when we think about moms, dads, and who count as parents. Spoiler, no one's ready. Who is a parent? If the government's making these babies, or these businesses are making these babies, and they're making these falsified wombs, it's a God complex, like we talked about with this control situation. Forget the fact that mom gave birth to me. It may be I was just printed in a science pod. For real research, it's getting strange, but this is what's happening. Now, this is an AI image that he shared, but he says this is exactly what they're working on. And then guess who made a comment? Elon said, sadly, it's not far off. And so we need to pay attention to the breakdown of our families. Now we're seeing the breakdown of the fact that there is no mom and dad. What scares me about that is, again, And when we build a family structure, we actually can solve a lot of these problems. We can solve farming. We can grow food. We can solve owning because we can work together. We can solve being happy and joy because we have our family. And understanding how the proper way of respect is because our father and our mother runs our homes and our children listen and they obey, and it helps us build a family structure for people to see the importance of living a civility life. Something that is just where we all want joy and happiness. It starts with our family. Well, that is breaking down now. We saw that the 60s and 70s with government intervention did not need men in homes anymore. Just women raising kids and the government will do the rest. And now we're seeing the value of the mom going away too. It's amazing to see. All these stories are just representing technology and the growth of opportunity for people to become, quote unquote, like God. And sadly, that's what scares me, just like I said yesterday. This way of thinking, this mode of thinking, I'm scared that this mode of thinking is making people think that they don't need God. And the whole time, God is saying, you need me more than ever. I mean, famine, pestilence, crops gone, cattle not raised, people can't afford homes, people living on the street, drugs are going crazy. Now we realize the stuff that's supposed to keep us safe, 50% of it is neurotoxins. But our government allowed those things to happen, right? You start losing money and jobs, all this won't even matter anymore. Morgan Stanley's Adam Jones in a new note said this. He said, we estimate one humanoid robot at $5 an hour will generate more than what two humans at $25 an hour each will generate. That means these humanoids will be worth way more than what even humans would be at 2 times the value. It says that a humanoid that costs $200,000 will save millions of dollars for companies. It says for the average businesses that are trying to save money, they could buy 30 to 40 or 50,000 robots to do the simplest of things, and they won't need humans. It says for the average business, they can get an AI agent and get clerking done, answering phones done, simple automations done. He said for $5 to $10 to $20 a month for a subscription to people like ChatGPT or Grok 4. And he can do the work of all these people that you can replace now. It says that AI could truly replace over 40% of the workforce within the next 5 years. Now there's been some studies that even show 60 to 70%. But if we say just 40%, now remember, our economy is based on our unemployment numbers being like less than 5%. You know, we're like in a depression if it's like 10% or 15 or 20%. And so you're saying AI could take 40% of the jobs? And then you have billionaires making their own food. People can't afford their own houses, so they're losing them to big corporates. So now they got to rent, and now they can't grow their own food. Now they can't get passes, and now we realize the stuff that we're putting in our arm is all neurotoxic. Welcome to America and the freedom of it. Last story, I'm going to close up. Trump says we will lock down Washington. It says as of tonight, the deployment, which will include FBI, DEA, ATF, immigration, and ICE divisions, along with federal agencies, will make sure that the streets of Washington, D.C. is safe. Per capita homicides is more than any African country that we're dogging out and talking about how they take advantage of their people. Washington, D.C. has per capita homicides worse than every country in the Middle East and Africa per capita when it comes to homicides per people. Is that encouraging that that's our state capital that's supposed to represent the freedom of America? So Trump is trying to get a handle on it. Now the thing is that going to work? I don't think, because bureaucracy is not the answer. I mean, look at Chicago, they're begging for money. Look at California, they're begging for money. Look at New York, they're actually giving more money to illegals instead of Americans, but then they're coming back to the government saying we don't have enough money to cover the pensions that we needed. Ed Dowd came out and said that the reason that 2020 happened was because they needed more money to hit the stock market for these players in these portfolios because the pensions are not funded. So that gave them enough money to print and push into the economy and also make money by selling into the stocks in the corporate America through what they were selling. That's the only way we were able to make it, because our government has wasted so much money. Now, no matter what your thoughts are on all these stories, what we've realized is this. Government is not the answer. FDA can give them passes and not me, but my food is way more wholesome and natural. Government is not the answer. Technology is not the answer. It can make great things. Robots could be wonderful, but they're taking your jobs. It's great to see what they can do with surgeries and save your life, but it's not to say we can take our mother and fathers away from children and they can be grown in a pod. We need to make sure that we're understanding the dangers of these pestilence, the dangers of famines, the dangers of billionaires who think they can rule it all, and also government who thinks they can take it all. Guys, let me know your thoughts on today's video. Again, our goal is to show you these things because you need to prepare. You need to buy the food. You need to stockpile the water. You need to buy the things that makes you more self-sufficient. If you own your own property, you better start growing things. Look, we're literally sitting by a kitchen garden that's got piles of food growing in it. Every plant, the beautiful plants around my pool, guess what? 99% of them, 99% are edible. Not only that, a lot of them are flowering and they're providing for our bees, which provides honey. Every part of our life has been instilled in making food real for us because that independence is leaving us. And then that leads us, we're dependent on that FDA salmon, FDA beef that's not been tested. And to be honest with you, they've learned from how to grow it through cancer cells. Did you know that? The way that they can rapidly grow that 3D printed meat or that lab-grown meat to get it to grow quick and fast. Cancer cells. They learned it from cancer cells. Unbelievable. Guys, let me know your thoughts on today's video. God bless.